My name's Charles Bronson, and all my life I've wanted to be famous.
Hey everyone, I'm Connor Keeney. Right there, that's me. And this is an examination of schizophrenia and mood disorders in American horror cinema.
We are alone, aren't we?
It would seem, upon diligent observation, that the paramount tentpoles of the horror genre all share a singular characteristic. Their antagonists, their thematic content, and their moral ideology center around the presence of a potent and unrelenting existential dread. This is a departure from the gross-out aspect of the horror genre, including films such as Saw, Silent Hill, and the like. These ideas have even found their way into children's programming, such as Saban's 1993 Fox Kids classic, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. This existential dread, I've found often, is central to one shared characteristic amongst the film's antagonists. They are severely, incurably, and dangerously mentally ill. Generally speaking, the illness is something akin to schizophrenia or a general mood disorder, regardless of whether the diagnosis is acknowledged in dialogue or visually. That being said, the depiction of these ailments often bear a troubling similarity. They are all portrayed, on the part of the antagonist, as an intellectual advantage over the protagonist or the morally virtuous aim of the hero. This, in and of itself, presents a troubling issue in the context of genre. The mental illness is exalted as a dangerous weapon, wielded by the hands of maniacal geniuses. It is a pervasive trope that emanates throughout even the most well-known horror pictures in the history of American cinema. Moreover, the idea that mental illness poses as and is the vehicle for the existential threat is a problematic and even borderline dangerous idea, perhaps one that may have even led to some real-life fatalities. The most common of these examples in the cultural lexicon, and perhaps the paragon, is Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter in the 1992 Academy Award winner for Best Picture, The Silence of the Lambs. Hopkins as Lecter, despite being a severely deranged cannibal, is exacting, vindictive, resourceful, and, above all else, brilliant in the execution of his plan to escape police custody. He threatens the protagonist, Jodie Foster's Clarice, on several occasions, particularly with reference to his past activity as a serial killer. These diatribes tend towards the beginning of the film, with the aim being to introduce Lecter's character as a vicious psychopath with little regard for morality. There are distinct and numerous problems with this, not the least of which is that mental illness that even remotely nears the severity of Lecter's is extremely uncommon, and any actual instances of serial killers engaging in cannibalism and or dismemberment are so incredibly uncommon that you've likely been exposed to their stories at some point already. The issue with this is that, generally speaking, these bad actors are swiftly caught and convicted, very much like that of the movie's other antagonist, an abductor referred to in the film as Buffalo Bill. Portraying Lecter's revolting lunacy as a tool in the accomplishment of his vile agenda not only flies in the face of the suspension of disbelief surrounding the reality of mental illness, but also perpetuates a dangerous narrative regarding the mentally ill that is, oddly enough, often accepted as medical fact in the general public discourse. It is undeniable that the depiction of mental illness in the cultural landscape, specifically in horror cinema, and as we've seen it repeated in characters like Norman Bates, Jack Torrance, Jason Voorhees, and a myriad of others, has had a negative impact on general cultural attitudes towards mental illness. However, in examining the issue more closely, we find that the misunderstandings that these media texts create at least have correlation between the portrayal of mental illness in cinema and lethal consequences in the larger society. USA Today reported in 2015 that American citizens who are afflicted with a mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed by a police officer than those who are not afflicted. This statistic in and of itself reveals that there is a deep systemic misunderstanding of the fundamental nature of most people who have a mental illness, especially when you consider that, according to the National Institutes of Health, only 4% of outpatients in an urban setting have a history of homicide attempts, not all of which are necessarily linked to their particular disease. This is a mathematical inequity when compared to the likelihood of a stable outpatient being killed by an officer, and if historical precedent is any indication, during a routine event such as the 2015 traffic stop that resulted in the suicide of Sandra Bland, an upstanding contributing American citizen with a history of suicidal tendencies, it is a severe and even deadly oversight. Regardless of the undeniable quality of the aforementioned cinematic achievements, there is an equally undeniable understanding that, when faced with the factual evidence, content creators are not only responsible for the portrayal of the mentally ill across all media, but also responsible for examining the narratives they perpetuate. An industry-wide call to more closely examine the principles upon which we operate in the genre, specifically in regards to the currently poor representation of those afflicted with mental illness, is not only strongly encouraged but irrefutably necessitated by the acts precipitated as a result of current cinematic activity.
Want that fly? I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know and they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.